King Arthur rallied his band of warrior druids at one of the most sacred sites of the ancient world. Dressed in white robes, carrying swords and staffs, and occasionally checking their iPhones, his religious order gathered under the towering megaliths of Stonehenge. This was not 1,500 years ago, but a blustery, drizzly morning last week. And leading the ceremony was not King Arthur, but a 62-year-old man who was born John Timothy Rothwell. 30 years ago, Rothwell became convinced he was the reincarnation of King Arthur and legally changed his name to King Arthur Other Pendragon. Before this transformation, he was a British Army soldier and a member of a biker gang. Now he is a pagan priest, a sword-bearer, and the chieftain druid of this anachronistic creed. NBC News visited him and a few dozen of his followers as they gathered at Stonehenge for the spring equinox last week. Halfway between the shortest and longest days of the year, this was one of the most important events in the Druid calendar. Arthur is one of some 4,000 people who identify themselves as Druids in the UK, according to government figures. As an eco-warrior, Arthur has been arrested dozens of times in relation to various alleged missteps committed by officialdom around Stonehenge. He has also run for election to the British Parliament several times.
Reuters reports that according to a U.S. think tank, satellite imagery of North Korea's main nuclear test site taken over the weekend indicates that Pyongyang could be in the final stages of preparations for a sixth nuclear test. Washington-based 38 North, a website that monitors North Korea, said the images from Saturday showed the continued presence of vehicles and trailers at the Pyongyang test site and signs that communication cables may have been laid to a test tunnel. Another 38 North report said recent satellite images of North Korea's nuclear research center at Yongbyon showed rail and vehicle movements that could indicate a plan to resume reprocessing of spent fuel rods to produce plutonium for bomb fuel.
The Associated Press reports that 3 storm chasers were killed in a crash during severe West Texas storms on Tuesday. Tornadoes were reported near the location of the crash at a remote intersection close to the town of Spur. Storm chasers Kelly Jean Williamson, Randall Delane Yarnell, and Corbin Lee Yeager were killed instantly when their vehicles collided at the rural crossroads. Forecasters predict that 19 million people in Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana could see tornadoes as the threat continues to shift eastward.
Democrats threaten an all-night filibuster to delay an initial procedural vote for the ban on abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected. A GOP-led House committee was scheduled to vote on the provision Tuesday night. It was added to a separate bill that would ban most abortions at 20 weeks of pregnancy. The new version would include several abortion restrictions. If the heartbeat proposal goes into effect, it would be the strictest ban in the United States. Democrats criticized the legislation in an afternoon press conference and vowed to delay the committee vote, though they don't have the legislative power to stop the bill's advancement. Their filibuster tactic could also be ended through chamber rules.
In a rare appearance since the presidential election, former nominee Hillary Clinton spoke to women at the Professional Business Women of California conference on Tuesday. Clinton addressed gender inequality in the tech industry and aligned herself with employees who have spoken out against sexism. Clinton said, "We need to reset the table so women are no longer required to accept and adapt to sexism at work." Her remarks come at the heels of a series of sexual harassment allegations brought against rideshare giant Uber.
Afghanistan plans to double the number of elite special forces from 17,000 troops. This is part of a long-term strategy to bolster units stretched and exhausted by persistent attacks from Taliban insurgents and other Islamist militants. Special forces, who represent a small fraction of the 300,000-strong armed forces, have been carrying out nearly 70% of the Army's offensive operations across the country, which underline Afghanistan's heavy reliance on them. While regular forces, including police, are deployed largely to defend positions, special forces are taking the battle to militants from Kunduz, sometimes working in tandem with U.S. counterparts. Under current plans, special forces would double, and the government is talking to foreign donors about contributing through funding and other assistance. Recruitment and training was already underway for more commandos, as well as special forces support units like medical care, intelligence, logistics, and communications.
Cambodia banned the sale and export of breast milk March 28th after suspending it last week. United States-based company Ambrosia Labs had been exporting breast milk sourced from Cambodian mothers for 2 years. According to the company's website, it was sold as a safe alternative for those who can't produce their own breast milk. Export was initially suspended while the Ministry of Health investigated the effect it had on Cambodian mothers and children and whether the practice violated organ trafficking laws. UNICEF was critical of the practice and told Reuters that breast milk's, quote, commercialization in Cambodia should not be supported. And a letter signed by the Secretary of State, Cambodia's Council of Ministers, said, quote, even though we are still poor, we are not so poor that we have to sell human breast milk. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Neela Uni.
CNN has reported that, according to a Lagos, Nigeria High Court judge, consumers of Sprite and Fanta have more to worry about than rotting teeth. The court held that high levels of benzoic acid and sunset additives in the popular soft drinks could pose a health risk to consumers when mixed with ascorbic acid, commonly known as vitamin C. Justice Adedayo Oyebanji ordered the Nigerian bottling company to place written warnings on Fanta and Sprite bottles against drinking them with vitamin C, and awarded costs equivalent to $6,350 against the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control for failing to ensure health standards.
Tropical cyclone Debbie blasted into Australia's northeast coast Tuesday, bringing devastating winds and rain. The astronauts on board the International Space Station got a dramatic view of the burgeoning storm, and NASA released a video showing the powerful system from orbit. The video lasts nearly 8 minutes and shows the curve of the planet as Debbie comes into view. The perspective makes the cyclone's circular formation look absolutely huge. Debbie is already weakening after making landfall, but flash flooding concerns remain. NASA released an astounding time-lapse video of 3 separate hurricanes in 2016.
People are moving to urban areas where it's harder to be part of the wild. This disconnect dramatically increases the odds that kids will get sick. It may even detract from kids' abilities to mature into happy, well-adjusted adults. A frog in the hand, as it turns out, may be a sort of microbial medicine. There is some evidence that to increase your kids' odds of being allergy-free, they need to be exposed to many kinds of microbes. This exposure teaches their immune system which microbes are good, which are bad, and which are neither. Billions of microbes live on your skin. They also live in your gut, mouth, and virtually everywhere else on your body. They form incredibly complex interconnected communities called microbiomes that scientists are just beginning to understand and appreciate. Human beings rely on these microorganisms for their health and very existence. But the shift to urban environments has caused some of these species to disappear. Their absence puts all of us, including in some cases our kids, at greater risk for allergies, asthma, inflammatory bowel disease, dementia, and other maladies. Kids raised in rural environments rarely had autoimmune disorders or allergy-related conditions. In urban areas, these disorders are much more common. We need to reconnect our kids with the microbes they need, and more generally, with the wild they need, however tiny that wild may be.
A Detroit district judge approved a settlement on Tuesday which would bring $100 million state dollars to take out corroded water lines in Flint, Michigan. The nearly $100 million will go towards tearing out lead or galvanized steel water lines to at least 18,000 Flint homes by 2020. $10 million of the settlement will be set aside for unexpected extra expenses. Governor Rick Snyder said that the deal mirrors the state's commitment to providing the resources necessary for the residents of Flint to recover from the crisis.
A Seattle federal judge refused to dismiss a lawsuit brought on behalf of tens of thousands of immigrants who were not made aware of the one-year deadline to apply for asylum. The case concerns immigrants who were found to have credible fear of persecution in their home country. According to lawyers, those released from immigration custody pending deportation proceedings were not told about the deadline to apply for asylum. The suit alleges that due to backlogs in the immigration system, asylum seekers aren't often scheduled to appear in court for over a year, thus missing the deadline.
A lawsuit filed in a New York district court alleges that Port Authority police officers engage in a pattern of wrongfully arresting men that officers perceive as gay or gender nonconforming. The suit is being brought by Legal Aid Society, a nonprofit that serves low-income New Yorkers in fighting the practice of baseless charges for things such as public lewdness and exposure. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, as well as the PAPD, have declined to comment on the litigation.
On Tuesday, the president of the National Association of Theater Owners expressed himself against President Donald Trump during his CinemaCon address. John Fithian, NATO's CEO, appealed to the annual convention of movie exhibitors for continued support of globalization in the film industry to support free trade and the immigrant talent abroad. Fithian then slammed Trump by referencing his withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership by saying exhibitors around the world, as we know, lose billions of dollars each year to piracy. The losses would be much greater if not for global cooperation.
On Tuesday, a U.S. federal judge approved a plan that will require Michigan state officials to replace water lines serving 18,000 homes in the city of Flint over the next 3 years. Under the plan, which was approved by District Judge David Lawson in Detroit, Michigan, will pay at least $97 million to replace water lines containing lead or galvanized steel by the year 2020. The settlement is the result of multiple lawsuits filed last year by the National Resources Defense Council and American Civil Liberties Union against state and city officials.
North Carolina is continuing to lose money over bathroom access for transgender people. According to Reuters, the NCAA has threatened to deny North Carolina lucrative hosting duties for college championship events through 2022 if the state does not change its infamous bathroom laws. North Carolina is the only state that bars transgender people from using government-run restrooms that match their gender identity. Supporters of the law passed by the state's Republican-controlled legislature say it is needed for public safety. Opponents maintain that the law is unnecessary and discriminatory.
On Monday, following comments by the U.S. Attorney General, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said that the city will be at risk of terror attacks if Jeff Sessions slashes fundings for federal law enforcement in sanctuary cities. In a statement, de Blasio said, "Any attempt to cut NYPD funding for the nation's top terror target will be aggressively fought in court. We won't back down from protecting New Yorkers from terror or from an overzealous administration fixated on xenophobia and needless division." The comments come in response to the latest crackdown on sanctuary cities by Donald Trump's administration.
Reuters reports that U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry pushed for opening Nevada's Yucca Mountain nuclear waste site in a meeting with the state's governor on Monday, but the local leader said he remains staunchly opposed to the project. The visit with Governor Brian Sandoval was Perry's first official travel since becoming Energy Secretary. The multi-billion-dollar nuclear storage project, which was rejected by former President Barack Obama, has been championed by the Trump administration. Most of Nevada's politicians question the long-term safety of the site and the transportation of radioactive waste through the state.
Protesters clash with police in Paris over the killing of a Chinese man in his home. A group of angry demonstrators broke down barricades and threw projectiles at officers during a March 27th protest. Authorities said 35 people were arrested and 3 officers were injured during the demonstration. 56-year-old Xiao Liu was allegedly shot in front of his children during a raid of his property by police on March 26th. Police noted the officer fired in self-defense after Liu wounded an officer with a bladed weapon. Liu's family disputes the account and noted he was only holding a pair of scissors to debone fish. According to the local, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesman urged Paris to guarantee the safety and legal rights of Chinese citizens in the country. French authorities have opened an inquiry into the shooting. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Rachel Latham.
Developing this morning, a fight over bathroom access. A Wisconsin teen who is transgender is taking his school district to federal court.
This morning, CBS 2's Sandra Torres is joining us live outside the Dirksen Federal Building with a closer look at that case. Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Aaron and Lionel. No decision today, but attorneys for both sides gave oral arguments today in the U.S. Court of Appeals. And here's the case. The student is 17-year-old Ashton Whitaker, that's his name, and he's a senior at Kenosha Unified School District. He has identified himself as a boy for the last 3 years. Whitaker sued the district over its restroom policy, saying that he should be allowed to use the boys' restroom. A federal judge ruled in his favor back in September, but the district appealed that decision. So today, an attorney representing the district said their bathroom policy goes by the birth certificate of each student, meaning if Whitaker changes his birth certificate, he can be allowed in the boys' bathroom. But in Wisconsin, he'll need to have sex change surgery in order for that to happen. We spoke to Whitaker's mother after the hearing.
There's still a lot of hate in the world, a lot of misunderstanding, definitely, but there's still a lot of hope, and that's what we kind of want to come away with. We feel very positive about how it went, how things have been going.
Whitaker has had hormone treatments. He's also been identified as a boy by his physicians, but he has not had sex change surgery yet. The appellate panel will now review this case, and it is not clear when a decision will be made.
I am thrilled to be out of the woods. And in the company of so many inspiring women. And there is no place I'd rather be than here with you other than the White House. Recently, photos have been making the rounds on social media showing groups of men in Washington making decisions about women's health. Decisions to strip away coverage for pregnancy and maternity care, or limit access to reproductive health care around the globe. We shake our heads and think, how could they not have invited any women to the table? Well, a provocative opinion piece in the New York Times this week argues that it may not be an oversight at all, but an intentional signal. Don't worry, the men are in charge of everything. We will need to fight back twice as hard, not for the sake of politics, but because these are bad policies that will hurt people and take our country in the wrong direction. You know, there's a little mantra I've been repeating to myself lately. It's a little silly, the kind of thing that pops into your head when you take a lot of long walks in the woods. But as I think about the outpouring of activism we're seeing, despite all the noise and the nonsense, 4 words keep coming back to me: resist, insist, persist, enlist. Now is the time to demand the progress we want to see and to work together to make it real in our own lives, in our businesses, in our government, in our families, our country, and the world. And I'll be right there with you every step of the way. Thank you all very much.
Russian interference in this election, I think, should be of utmost concern to all Americans. Really? Well, what about your connection to the Kremlin cache, Mr. Podesta? Joining us right now from Tallahassee is Peter Schweitzer. He's the author of Clinton Cash, president of the Government Accountability Institute. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve.
So tell us about John Podesta and his connection to a Kremlin-backed company.
Well, in 2011, John Podesta joins the board of this very small energy company called Juul Energy, based out of Massachusetts. About 2 months after he joins the board, a Russian entity called Rusnano puts 1 billion rubles, which is about $35 million, into John Podesta's company. Now, what is Rusnano? Rusnano is not a private company, Steve. It is a fund directly funded by the Kremlin. In fact, the Russian science minister called Rusnano Putin's child. So you have the Russian government investing in one of John Podesta's businesses in 2011 while he is an advisor to Hillary Clinton at the State Department.
While he's an advisor to Hillary Clinton. Okay, does anybody in the Trump circle rise to the level where there's this kind of money involved?
No, I haven't seen that yet. Nobody that is, has an advisory role in the White House has had this money exchanged, and certainly the money hasn't exchanged, as far as we know, while they have been advising the president.
Okay.
The House Intelligence Committee had been making waves. Just over a week ago, it's where it was revealed there was an active criminal investigation into possible collusion between the Trump team and Russia.
The FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
The committee had been due to meet again, but amid controversy, that hearing was abruptly cancelled. And there are now claims there may have been an attempt to muzzle one of those due to give evidence.
Pleased to be joined this morning by EPA.
Sally Yates, an Obama official, stayed on as acting Attorney General under President Trump until he fired her for failing to implement his stalled travel ban. The Washington Post has published letters from her lawyer to the White House in which she asks whether she's clear to testify. The letter states if there's no reply by Monday at 10 a.m., she'll assume there's no objection. The White House press secretary seized on that.
The report in the Washington Post is 100% false. The letters that they frankly publish on their website all back up everything I just read. All of the letters are available on their website. I hate to give them the traffic. But the reality is that they specifically say, if you don't respond, we're going to go ahead. We didn't respond. We encouraged them to go ahead.
That seemed a clear answer, but the Washington Post also published a reply from the Justice Department telling Yates's attorney she may be subject to presidential communications privilege, constraining her testimony. The man who cancelled the hearing in the end, Chairman Devin Nunes, did not consult with his committee colleagues. He didn't talk to them before he was briefed on new information at the White House last week either. Democrats believe Nunes, who served on the Trump transition team, can no longer head an impartial inquiry.
Given the severity of the issues, the importance of the issues, I really think it would be best if he were to step aside, let someone else handle this investigation.
Allegations of collusion between the Trump team and Russia remain deeply controversial, as now too is the investigation by the House Intelligence Committee into it all. It's worth noting, though, that the parallel committee in the Senate has a hearing on Thursday, and the most important investigation of them all, the criminal one by the FBI, continues its work well away from the cameras.